And here. Okay. The idea is to have a short update about what's happening in Israel and Gaza, about 30 minutes long. I'll also take a bit of time to put a bit more of a focus on Yemen today, the Houthis, Yemen, trade, and what's actually happening there. So let's start off. So the background of this picture is a mailbox. This is a mailbox at the entrance to kibbutz near Oz. This is one of the kibbutzes that are about 1 mile away from the Gaza Strip. Actually, that's not true. It's closer to half a mile from Gaza Strip. They're one of the kibbutzes that were hurt worst during the 7th of October. The post office put these stickers on each one of the post boxes. The red sticker says murdered, and the black sticker says kidnapped, and there's a blue sticker that says released. So that's for the post office to know who you should give letters to and who should you keep letters and pass them on to a family member. This is just to give a sense of what's the background feeling here in Israel. Something of this sort, something like this picture will appear to you somewhere at some point in your day. But before we actually started, I'm going to start with this guy. This is the news from about an hour and a half ago. And before I go into the other news from the last couple of weeks, this guy has been killed or assassinated by Israel about an hour and a half or 2 hours ago in Lebanon. Saleh al-Aruri, he's extremely important. He is the deputy head of Hamas. Founding commander of the Hamas military wing, sat 15 years in jail in Israel, was released in the Gilad Shalit prisoner exchange, one Israeli soldier for 1,024 Palestinians from Israeli jails, including this person, Saleh al-Aruri, and the head of Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar as well. Lived in Beirut and was killed today by an Israeli drone. Now, if you can see here the picture, El-Aruri's interview, but look down at the date. The date is the 30th of August, 2023. He gave an interview to a Lebanese newspaper in August that made a lot of headlines in this world. And this is some of the things that he said in that interview. This is the 30th of August, a month and a week before 7th of October. I highlighted this little bit. One of the main figures in Hamas today, this is somebody talking about his interview. It was in Arabic and it's long. And one of the main figures in Hamas today warned of an all-out war in the region. He warned of it in the 30th of August, told this to Israel, right? And he said that this will be prompted by Israel's current policy in the West Bank, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and provocations. He also said that resistance organizations in Gaza, Hamas, Palestinians, must take advantage of the internal division in Israel around the judicial reform that was happening and advance this campaign before Israeli control of the West Bank is expanded and Smotrich policy of migration and deportation from the West Bank is realized. Remember, the Smotrich man, we'll talk about him later, he's Israel's finance minister. The guy who read this article for the Israeli National Security Strategic Society, something like that, he said, you can see on the right, the all-out war he mentioned, in which Hezbollah is involved, and to a certain extent also Iran, is nothing more than wishful thinking when it is voiced by a Hamas official. This is how Israel understood this interview a month before the 7th of October. This man was killed today. Okay, we'll deal with it, and you can see what does he say is the reason for the war that he will go out to on the 7th of October. Let's talk a little bit about the war and what's happening. This little map on the left shows you the Gaza Strip, the area in the north that's delineated with this dotted red line has been evacuated. The yellow areas is where Israeli army is active at the moment. And you can see also another area in the southern half that also has been evacuated by Israel, and Israel is very active there as well. All right. This is a Hamas fighter's GoPro of fighting against Israeli soldiers. These are Israeli soldiers in the northern part of Gaza Strip a couple of nights ago. The war in Gaza is a real war. It's face to face. People shooting one at another, jumping out of holes, attacking. It's not just airplanes and bombs from the air. There's actual fighting. Israel is trying to achieve dismantling of Hamas fighters, which are somewhere between 20 to 40,000 people. Dismantling of Hamas capabilities militarily. That means you have to get to every last rocket launcher, every last building that's been retrofitted to make bombs, right? And to try and capture as many of their leaders in order to stop the Hamas. That means that when you go in, you separate areas. You separate the north from the south. You separate the city from the hinterland. You separate the neighborhood. You separate a group of houses, and then you go through one by one. This is extremely dangerous, and it's extremely costly in lives. It allows for the other side to attack you, and it allows for you to attack anybody who threatens you. And for a soldier, anybody who's not on your side is a threat. That's the basic idea of soldiering. The ramifications of the war at the moment are, for example, in Israel, this is a kindergarten in a hotel in Nazareth. This is a whole community that had to be removed from their village because they're too close to the border. And now they're all sitting in one hotel. And the hotel's dining room, half of it has become a kindergarten. About 125,000 people in Israel around Gaza and another 60,000 around the northern border with Lebanon are no longer in their houses. Around 200,000 people are living. Today, Israeli hotels are fully booked. You will not find a room in any one of them, not even one of the worst hotels there in Tiberias behind the bus station. You will not find a room. It's full of Israeli internal displaced people. In Gaza, the situation is different. In Gaza, we're talking about somewhere close to 85% of the population not living in their homes. That's close to 2 million people. We're talking about close to 20,000 people killed. The situation is incredibly dire in Gaza. The humanitarian crisis is at its highest ever. So this is the ramifications, in a sense, of the war at the moment. When you go to war,
You have to accept it coming through on the line.
Whoop, I'm muting. Okay. When you go to war, a war is about trying to achieve your goals with as little damage to your soldiers and to, in a sense, your reputation as an army. But at the same time, in order to have that type of control, you have to have a very strong control of every moving part. When you go to war, the amount of operations that you are leading means that you will have less control. It's just an issue of numbers. When you're leading over 100 operations a day, you will have mistakes. You will have laxity in places. You'll have misunderstanding. That's what's happening today in Gaza. On the right, you can see an airstrike that disappeared in the New York Times in Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. Gaza and Hamas operatives operate from civilian structures. If it's schools or hospitals, there's been so many documented cases. At some point, Israel decided to bomb a building. By the fact that they used 3 very heavy bombs with a detonator that has a time fuse on it, allows it to go deeper in, they were targeting a tunnel. This tunnel apparently was beneath some houses, and 126 people died in this one Israeli attack. This is what happens when you make such a war, as Israel is doing. It's such incredible intensity. The intensity of this war is higher than any other war that's comparable. Afghanistan or Iraq or Ukraine, the intensity, the amount of fire in a short amount of time in a small space. On the other hand, if you want to allow your soldiers to take advantage of the situation, you have to be a little bit laxer on your orders because they will have to be independent. 3 Israeli hostages in the picture on the left were killed by Israeli soldiers when they were escaping Hamas captivity in Gaza. These 3 guys escaped the Hamas, removed their shirts, tried to get Israeli soldiers to rescue them, and they were killed. This happens because the soldier sees everything as a risk to him. When you are laxer in your rules, these things happen, right? And it got all the news because they are Israeli hostages. But these things happen also when the cameras are not around. And the intensity of this war is creating the atmosphere in which Israel is getting criticized so badly at the moment. And it really is because a lot of these things and the humanitarian situation in Gaza. 3 news sites I picked here. On the right, you can see from Fox News, Israel announces partial troop withdrawal. Just 2 days ago, Israel released 20,000 reserve soldiers back home. Big party, people very happy. But that's still about 10% of the reserve soldiers. This is the beginning of a new phase. When you're releasing your reserve duty soldiers who you have to pay full compensation for, depending on whatever their job was before, it's a very expensive thing. Releasing them is saying that we will be using less soldiers, less intensity. We're moving into a new phase. We can see it also happening because the USS Gerald R. Ford, the aircraft carrier, and its tactical strike group, which is another 11 ships, is going back to the US, to Norfolk. This is the US saying to Israel, time is up. Right? It doesn't mean that the US doesn't have another carrier group here in the area. It does. An enormous amount of military hardware, but the extra one is moving away. And this is signaling to everybody that the US is saying this is now going to go lower. And on the left, this is from Al Jazeera, and it's an analysis by a Palestinian writer. Has Israel weakened Hamas enough to win the war on Gaza? It came out today. That's the big question. Also on the Hamas side and on the Israeli side, has Israel weakened Hamas enough now that it's leaving the massive attack on Gaza? That's something that we really do not know yet. There are people who say that Hamas has more power or less power, but nobody knows. But what everybody does know is that there's no such thing as vacuum. Something comes into any hole. So if Hamas is not active in helping the Palestinians and Israel is not, somebody will come into that hole. And it could be somebody better or worse. On the Palestinian side, at the moment, like I said, over 20,000 people dead. The Israeli military claims that about 8,500 of the dead are Hamas activists. We do not know at the moment, it cannot be confirmed. Close to 60,000 people injured. These are the numbers that we get from Hamas medical personnel. But you have to remember that only 6 of the 28 hospitals are working. So most people who are injured are not getting to a hospital. 85% of the population displaced, and almost everybody in Gaza is living now on humanitarian aid. Almost everybody in the Gaza Strip. And that's the situation in Gaza at the moment. It's very, very hard life in Gaza at the moment. Israel is moving out also because of this situation. It's realizing that that's untenable. The guy who made this policy survey, Palestinian Future, is called Khalil Shkaki, a very important person. And he's very clear about what the Palestinians want as a solution. He's incredibly influential. He's a very important researcher and pollster. And he says the only viable solution is negotiating process between Israel and the PLO within the Arab regional framework, right? If Israel doesn't do that, it may soon find itself returning to the implicit arrangements that existed with Hamas in the Gaza Strip before October 7th. If you don't do something, you're going to go back to that situation. There's no such thing as a void. And what he says is that Israel should strengthen the Palestinian Authority. Israel should strengthen the Palestinian Authority versus Hamas. If Hamas gets points from fighting Israel, you can only win it by giving points to somebody who doesn't fight Israel, like the Palestinian Authority, according to Khalil Shkaki. What is the Palestinian Authority? On the right, you have Bill Clinton, Yitzhak Rabin, Yasser Arafat, Oslo Peace Accords 1993. They established some sort of independence for Palestinians called the Palestinian National Authority, right? The guy in the picture on the left in the UN is Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority. He has been elected in 2006. There haven't been elections since then. He is elected in 2006, and the Palestinian Authority rules over 7 cities in the West Bank. And Mahmoud Abbas, still sends money for all the teachers, all the doctors, all the nurses, all the street cleaners in Gaza. Still, every government worker in Gaza is getting paid by the Palestinian Authority. So he is what's supposed to take charge. But within the Palestinian world, there's very low levels of support for the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas personally. It's in the low tens. I mean, low tens, 12, 13, 14% approval ratings. For 3 reasons. Incredible amount of corruption happening there. They see the Palestinian Authority as unuseful against settlers or Israeli decisions. It doesn't do anything. It can't stop settlers. It doesn't have policing power. It can't stop Israel or even sit down for a conversation with Israel. It has no power. And third, and the worst for Palestinians, it's seen as complicit with Israeli occupation. It's seen as the worker that's doing Israel's dirty job in the West Bank. And that's why the Palestinian Authority is not acceptable by Palestinians and by the world to take over Gaza as it is. How do Gazans feel about Hamas? This is a poll that was done a couple of days ago. I don't trust polls that are done during war. They mean absolutely nothing. But we can see that most Palestinians do not feel a positive feeling towards Hamas. 67% do not like the Hamas, don't trust it, right? It does mean that most people in the West Bank and in Gaza today have a negative feeling towards Hamas. So what is the future? Who are the future options? These are 3 options. that are going to be starting to appear more and more on the news, and you'll start hearing their names. These are the options to lead the Palestinians in the day after the war. On the right, Muhammad Dakhlan. He's Gazan born. He's not Hamas. He's from the Fatah, from Yasser Arafat's party. He's from the other side. He's very close to the Egyptians and the Arab Emirates. He's a military man, and specifically, he's an intelligence man. He ran the Palestinian intelligence for many years and was part of the peace negotiations. But he's seen as extremely corrupt. On the left is the technocrat. This guy called Salam Fayyad. He was Palestinian prime minister for 6 years. He studied at Texas A&M, did his doctorate there. He was on the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. He now teaches at the Kennedy School of Business. He also is a fellow at Princeton. He's a very serious guy, an economist. He is the one that the international community wants. He doesn't have a lot of political traction on the ground, but. And in the center is the wild card. That's Marwan Barghouti. He is he's in Israeli prison. He was indicted for involvement in the murder of at least 5 Israelis, and he's been in jail for, I want to say, 18 years now. But he is very much a centrist. He's not a religious man. He's not a Hamas man. And in the past, he was very involved in the peace process. And he has a very strong traction amongst Palestinians. These are the 3 names you need to watch out for in the future. Israel. This is just I pulled out of Google. 80% of Israelis say Netanyahu must take public responsibility. Only 27% of Israelis see Prime Minister Netanyahu as best option. Support for Netanyahu plummets. It's very clear. Netanyahu's support is at its lowest ebb ever. On the left, you have Benny Gantz, who's supposed to be he is the leader of the political party that gets the most votes at the moment, doubling the amount versus Netanyahu. Netanyahu is plummeting. This is Israel's government. If you remember Saleh al-Aruri from the beginning, the Hamas operative who was killed in Lebanon, he talked about the guy on the right, Bezalel Smotrich, Israel's minister of economy, of finance. Smotrich says things like, we should resettle Gaza. We can manage Gaza if there's not 2 million people, but 100,000 or 200,000, meaning kick out 1.8 million, right? He calls for the displacement of Palestinians. On the other end, on the left, you have Israel's Minister of Internal Security, Ben-Gvir, right? He's talking about resettling Gaza with Israeli settlers. He is talking about deporting all the Palestinians from Gaza. He, as the head of the Israeli prison service, has banned meat from being served to Palestinian prisoners as a punishment measure, which is just crazy. The guy in the center is the Minister of Heritage from both of their party, and he gave the option of nuking Gaza. Now, these are all ministers in Israel's government. When Saleh al-Aruri says that the reason to go to war with Israel is partially because of the statements of people like Smotrich, it's not because these are statements. It's because Saleh al-Aruri believes this is what Israel's government wants to achieve. Netanyahu, 2 days ago, his judicial reform, one of his most important keystone laws within that overhaul, was banned by the Supreme Court. Okay? This is a bit of his end. If I go, can I even do this? No, 1 second. If I go back for a second, the fact that you have all of these news clips of these ministers in the government saying these things This is the firing shot at the beginning of a race saying that we are coming towards elections. None of these people are saying these things before, and now they've said it out loud. This has to do with them positioning themselves to the right of Benjamin Netanyahu in the upcoming elections. This is a political warning shot. Netanyahu is in a very bad position because the moment he's letting out reservists, the protests are going to rise. I went to the protest this Saturday. The picture on the right is from the protest. There's actually 3 protests every Saturday now in Tel Aviv. One protest is what you see on the right. It's a vigil for the kidnappees, for the people kidnapped to Gaza. About 125 people are still there, kidnapped in Gaza. It used to have about 25,000 people in the last couple of weeks. The protest on the left was the bring them home is in Tel Aviv at Habima Square, at the main theater square over there. It used to be the second largest protest, and that's more of a political change. Their main chant is elections now, right? Bibi should go. They have become now the largest protest, and on this Saturday, there were about 25,000 people there. There is a third protest, which is about ending the war at the moment, saying end war. That's much smaller, probably about 300 people, right? But the main thing is that the protest on the left, which is the more political one, is growing bigger and bigger at the moment. Netanyahu is in a bind from the Israeli situation. We can feel it. We're going towards elections in the upcoming months. In the next 6 months, this will happen. Last point I'm just going to throw out, take a couple of your minutes. Yemen. This is appearing in the news. You might be hearing little tidbits about Yemen lately. Stunning place. Never been there, on my super duper bucket list, right? It's a dream. Amazing place, going up into the mountains, desert, greenery, cacti, people. It's just a wonderful place, at least when I Google search it. When I grew up at home, I had from my grandma atlas from the 1950s, and it was a British atlas. And in there, when you open it up, Yemen had northern Yemen and southern Yemen as 2 different countries. Today, it's 1 country, but it's still at war. Since the 50s, there's a roiling, boiling, slowly simmering civil war always ongoing in Yemen. In the south and in the mountains is where the Shiite minority in Yemen lives, and that is the Houthis. That's the main tribe within it. And they're fighting against the Sunni majority, and they are backed by Iran, and the Sunni majority is backed by Saudi. And the Houthis are situated next to the Gulf, next to the waterway called Bab el-Mandeb, the entrance into the world, going up towards the Suez Canal. This is a video that they did in the 19th of November when a Houthi plane, helicopter, came to the ship, offloaded some armed men, and took over this oil. This ship is leading cars, taking cars from Turkey to India. And they captured it and held it for a couple of days. What happened to the Houthis suddenly? What are they doing stopping the world trade? This is a poster, a banner of the Houthis. If you read Arabic, the top says God is great, Allahu Akbar. And then it says Al-Maut lil-America, death to the United States. Al-Maut al-Israel, death to Israel. Al-Fanna ila al-Yahud, eliminate the Jews. Al-Nasr al-Islam, may Islam be victorious. They are a very much positioned in the anti-West world, part of the Iranian religious ideology. That's one of the main reasons they're doing it. The second reason is opportunism. There's going to be a peace summit in Bahrain on the 18th of January to sign a peace between the Houthis and the Saudis after a very long attempt of civil war or a war between the Saudis and the Yemenites that was not successful. And the Houthis are getting ready for that meeting by showing what they can do. They can close this area at the bottom, as you can see, which I made Bab el-Mandeb. That will stop the access to the Suez Canal. Iran said if the United States or any coalition lands in Yemen and attacks the Houthis, Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz. From Bab el-Mandeb down where you see in Yemen, 12% of all the world's oil is passing there. Strait of Hormuz is about 35% of all the world's oil that passes through there. If this happens, this is a big deal. That's the reason that the United States is entering this area. A naval coalition is coming down there, and you will see more and more American ships. And you might even see clashes. If you remember the USS Cole, things like that. This is what's happening now. It's a coalition that also includes Britain and France, the Dutch, the Spanish, Italians, the Norwegians are here. Bahrain are all in this coalition because this is 12% of the world's oil. It started by the Houthis saying, we'll stop Israeli ships, but that didn't catch enough attention. So they said they'll stop everybody's ships. So that's a bit about the Houthis in Yemen. Last thing I'll show you, on the right, it's an article from the New York Times from 3 days ago about the hand-in-hand school. If you received my newsletter, I mentioned it there. This is the school that I'm part of, and we started with our kids. On the left, you can see a picture from our school and a youthful Ilan down here on the floor about 11 years ago. No, can't be. She's 5. So 10 years ago, since my daughter was 5, when we started the school. And it's about how to live together here in the Middle East, Jews and Arabs together. Anyway, that was a 34.5-minute long update. Let's see. Are there any questions? What do I do now? I stop this and then, okay. I can see that there's no messages in the chat. So maybe I will ask people, unmute, ask one question so that because we have quite a few people, and then we'll try and collect a few. Okie dokie?
All right, Ilan, thank you. So you talked about those possible candidates to lead Palestinians. So what is your personal opinion? Who is going to really lead Palestinians and who has really a chance to make a change in this situation?
The 3 people I put up on the PowerPoint, here. No. What is this? These are the 3. Like most people, I'm always excited about a professional person like Salam Fayyad. Really, he's extremely successful. He's done a lot of things. He's a technocrat and he's a reformer. But he has very, very low traction amongst Palestinians. And I know from history, when the world tries to parachute a leader on a country after a revolution, if you parachute anybody in, he's going to be tainted by the people that were parachuting him in. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see that Salam Fayyad has that type of traction. Marwan Barghouti, on the other hand, has very much lots of traction, but he's in Israeli jail for being part of murder of quite a few Israelis. He was the head of the Tanzim, the Fatah's armed group during the Second Intifada. Israel doesn't want to release him. And maybe it will be a Mandela story, right? This is somebody with you are not 100% sure what exactly is his direction. And then the third guy, Muhammad Dakhlan, he's extremely well connected to all the people that will be rebuilding Gaza in the future. If it's the Saudis and the Qataris and the Egyptians. That's why he has a lot of options. I really don't know where it's going to go. It has to do a lot with what's the world going to be putting pressure on the situation. Okie dokie. John, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Ilan. This may be expanding the current topics you've mentioned today, but we listened to your Wider Lens recording of the video made a couple of weeks ago. It was fascinating. And you mentioned that China's a player, the Americans with the Abraham Accords and so forth like that. But I didn't hear you mention anything about Russia. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, do you have any just quick update? What is Russia doing in this whole, what is their interest in this conflict right here?
Russia used to be a very big player in the Middle East. It had a lot of influence and had a lot of ties to all of the Arab nations. Definitely, if you think of the OPEC and all of the oil problems in the 70s and so forth, Russia had a lot of influence in this area. All of the militaries in this area were built on Russian armaments. The peace treaty between Israel and Egypt brought Egypt into the American fold for the first time. Egypt's army is American. And then it pulled in the Saudis and the Gulf states. And today, America has taken over that area from Russia. Russia used to be very important in Syria. And as Iran is passing material from Iran to the Hezbollah in Lebanon through Syria, when Israel wanted to attack arms convoys going from Iran through Iraq, through Syria to the Hezbollah, it needed an okay from the Russian Air Force, which is flying around Syria, so we can do that. That's the very specific reason that Israel has never taken a side on the Russia-Ukraine war. Israel has not said anything really openly, and that's because it needs Russia's approval to attack these armaments. Russia has even less power to intervene at the moment with their war. Russia knows how to use soft power. A big net of media influencing, social media influencing was a couple of days ago found out, a big Russian system here in Israel. That's how Russia's playing this. Russia also understands that instability in this area is good for her. Instability in this area raises oil and gas prices. And they are living on their gas and oil exports to countries like China and India, who are still buying it in bulk. So they want to keep this thing boiling. They don't have the ability to intervene directly, so they're doing it cyber. Yeah. I'm surprised that it came out so clearly from me as well, just like you.
Ilan, thanks so much. Just wanted to jump. Great to see you. Thank you so much. It was terrific. You mentioned Hezbollah, and I just wanted to know, we didn't touch on the situation in the north with Lebanon, and what's the story there? Is there going to be the prospect of a full-on war, like we hear about? We're a long way away in Australia, but we hear about rockets being fired from Hezbollah as well, but it's not really the focus of the conflict at the moment. So yeah, would like you to touch on that if possible.
In Israel and Hezbollah, it's a bit different. It's a a different type of stalemate. Hezbollah has a lot more to lose than Hamas ever did. Hezbollah is part of the political system in Lebanon. It's actually the linchpin of Lebanese politics at the moment. It's been for a couple of years. Being a linchpin gives you tons of power, but it also puts a lot of responsibility on you. All of Lebanese society is looking at Hezbollah at the moment and trying to put whatever type of pressure they can on Hezbollah not to take it another step forward. Lebanon is an incredible crisis. Their currency has lost 98% of its value in the last 10 years. Just take, for example, something that costs $2 back wherever in Australia, and then 10 years later, that same item that cost you $2 costs 100. That's the jump that happened in Lebanon. So there's a lot of pressure on Hezbollah. Israel just assassinated this guy, Saleh al-Aruri, in Beirut, in a Hezbollah area of Beirut. And there is a lot of fear that this is the type of thing that will demand of Hezbollah a action, and that will demand of Israel an action, and the ball gets rolling. But at the same time, believe me, as much as we don't talk to the Hezbollah, we know people that talk to the Hezbollah. For example, Israel still has not said anything about Russia. We haven't said that Russia is wrong in the war with Ukraine. There's still an open channel to Russia to pass messages to Hezbollah, right? That is the main reason that Israel doesn't do these things, to be able to play both fields. And I'm sure that's what's happening at the moment. Nobody really wants a war with Hezbollah at the moment, except for those Israeli radicals that I've mentioned before in the politics. So I think that's, unless some big mistake happens, it's going to still keep in this pattern of pitter-patter. With our calculation is usually about 1 to 5 to 1 to 10. Hezbollah has killed 17 Israelis since the beginning of the war in the Northern Front, and we've killed somewhere around 120 back in Lebanon. So this is very tactical. Whatever happens, each tit gives you about 3 to 4 tats.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. I wanted to keep it as a short update, something that we can do easily, and you can get this information, and we don't have to do a deep dive. I will send you an update with the next I'll send you a newsletter with the next update. That's the one I was trying to tell you. I'll also put this thing up on YouTube if you want to see it later and want to share it with people and so forth.
I have one more question.
Sure.
The question is about Russian Jews who emigrated to Israel. Who do they support?
Generally speaking, Russian Jews who immigrated to Israel fall into a big group which is leaning to the right on the political map within Israel. They used to be Likud voters. Today, there's a party that is run by a guy called Avigdor Lieberman, who's today, he's the protege of Netanyahu. And about 6 years ago, he went against Netanyahu, and now he's in the opposition. He's a linchpin of the opposition to Netanyahu. And he gets the biggest chunk of, single chunk of Russian immigrants to Israel. But you'll have chunks of Russian immigrants in almost every other political party as well. So there's one big chunk, which is probably worth probably 8-9% of the vote. Somewhere, maybe 7. Let's just, a number I didn't use yet. 7% of the vote. And all the rest are mixed around. We have about 1 million people. So that should be about 12% of the vote. So you have another 5-6% that are mixed around everywhere. Yeah, today Russian immigrants in Israel are very integrated into society. All right.
Do they support Putin or Ukraine?
Generally speaking, in Israel, Ukraine. You see Ukrainian flags a lot in Israel. Very much in the majority, even though, you know, I have one of my closest friends. She came to Israel when she was 13. She's really one of my closest friends. And her parents, who are the funnest people in the world, just to come to their house, it's always so much fun. They still have business in Russia, and they're back and forth between Israel and Russia. One of the only countries that now during the war we still have flights to is Moscow. No problem. Got on a plane, went to Moscow. They were there last week, 4 days in the snow. Flew to Moscow, were 4 days and came back. She has a Ukrainian flag. Her parents still do business in Moscow. Yeah.
Complicated world.
Exactly. Okie dokie, guys and gals. Thank you so much for joining. This was so much fun for me. Hope this was a help. I'll put this up and I'll send you all the details. Bye.
Thank you, Ilan.
Ilan. Thank you.
Ilan was fabulous. See you soon.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Really, really great work. Really,
Bye.
really important. Thank you.
Enjoyed it
guys.
immensely.